Good evening, ladies. Thank you for joining us today. Today marks the second session actually of the IDC program. So thank you so much for joining us. Today, I'm just going to start with a couple of house rules. Please keep your cameras off as much as possible and your mics just to ensure that there's no issues or interruptances during the meeting. If you have any questions, of course, you're more than welcome to ask. Please just raise your hand in the meeting, and when Bidumila gets a chance, she will definitely record as well as answer any questions. If you have any questions, maybe if you're not comfortable to raise your hand, you can also put them in the chat, and she will answer any questions that you might have available. Yeah, Bidumelo, you can take us through the course. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tsiamo. I'll just switch on my camera for a few seconds. Can everyone hear and see me? Sanibonani, Dumelang. Good evening. Great. Good evening to everyone. My name is Bitumelo Kuzwayo, and I'll be taking today's session. I met some of you about just over a week ago. It was good to meet all of you guys or ladies, let me rather say that. Congratulations on making it to the MyDo ESD program. I do believe and trust that you guys, or as a collective, you'll have a lot to learn from MyDo. They offer a lot of services and a lot of support. And also thank you to the MyDo team for the opportunity to speak to the ladies about finances. Just a little bit about myself. Born and raised in Soweto. So I'm from Soweto. My parents still live there. I'm the youngest of two, and my day job is I work at UJ, and I am a head of department and senior lecturer there. And I've taught financial accounting as well as auditing. Also, I run a small business. It's an accounting services business based on the skills that I have. And then I also do a little bit of some property on the side as well. So that's me in a nutshell. In my spare time, I enjoy running. It's good therapy. I think the first session you guys had was around mental health and wellness. The way I save thousands of rands from going to a therapist as I run, or I just remain active. So I think it's very important as an individual to find something that keeps you sane, that you enjoy. So that's quite important. I don't know where in South Africa you guys are, but it was Yabanda. Like, it's freezing. I don't deal well with cold weather, but I hope everyone is keeping warm. I fear for people who live next to the mountains, Bomakwakwa, Drakensberg, Free State, all of those areas are quite cold. But yeah, so today I'll be covering a few things. I'm going to share my screen. And one thing that I'd love from everyone is I would like the session to be as interactive as possible. Please raise your hand, post any questions on the chat. I think it's easier and faster if people raise their hands and they ask their question, so that I also don't misinterpret a question that can be posted in the chat box. I'll ask a few questions so that the session is as customized as possible to you as the audience that I'm trying to serve tonight. So please be as engaged as possible. You have the most to take away if you give me as much information about who you are and what you do and the different challenges that you face and the things that you might consider, or you find a challenge that you don't know how to solve for. So that's the purpose of the session. I really hope it will be worthwhile and fulfilling. Before we start, I just have a question for everyone. What is your expectation of today? So why are you here? Did you come because you know my dosage? There's a session today. Why are you in the session and what are you hoping to gain from it? And I hope from that I'll be able to meet your expectations. At the session, I think it was the 28th of May, if I'm not mistaken, 2 weeks today, or I think it was 2 weeks ago today. Um, we were given a few goodie bags. So today, like I said, Yabanda. So I made myself a cup of tea and I'm using the My Dough mug that was given to us. So I hope you guys are putting your gifts to good use. So is there anyone who would like to share what they expect from today's session? You can type in the chat or you can raise your hand and unmute yourself. Nonkululeko?
Hi, afternoon, everyone. Boitubelo, thank you for the lovely intro. From my end, I think my expectations are purely around the course outlined by Maido as to what's going to be covered today. But I think the thing that I'm most interested in is obviously understanding taxes, right?
Okay.
So that's a very eek in my space. So I'd love to learn more about taxes, how to manage it, personally as well as from a business perspective.
Okay.
So that
And
would be
Nonkululeko, what type of business do you have or do you run?
it is a woman's intimate,
It's a?
women's intimates business.
Oh, I think I met you that day
Yes, we did meet.
where you manufacture
Yes,
lingerie or underwear for ladies. Yes, I remember.
yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so
Anyone
you can
else?
imagine with
Yes.
like import and stuff, I need to learn all the tricks of the trade when it comes to tax, what goes into it and what doesn't go into it and so forth.
Okay. No, thank you so much.
Right. Thank you.
I have two comments from Tato. My expectation is to understand banking and the different products and how they can benefit my business. Okay. And then Kulufelo, learning on handling finances, both from a business and personal perspective and understanding investments. Joy, hi there. I'm here to learn so that I can run my business better. I feel I don't have experience on a lot of things financially, so I need this. Then Deboheng, no, Debohang, sorry. My expectations is to understand how to handle my business finances to avoid hand-to-mouth problem. That's an important one. All of them are important, but I think that's in the session that we had in Santon, a lot of people mentioned like, how do I avoid as a business, never mind as a business, as an individual, not living from hand to mouth, and making also a business sustainable. No more on them. My expectations two are on taxation and reporting. Okay. Matabelo, I wouldn't say it's an expectation per se. However, I want to know how the bank accounts we choose benefit us as businesses, as I feel maybe I chose a wrong package. Okay. No, that's fair. And you know, Matabelo, it's never too late if you feel you in that type of a situation, but we'll speak to that later on. Newo, my business is a guest house. So my expectations is to learn how to manage my finances and taxes. Okay. No, so that's good to know some of the ladies' expectations. So what I'm going to do, please confirm if you can see the slide. It should say my door. Consumer Financial Education Program. Great. So what I'm going to do for bandwidth, and as Siam had suggested, I'm going to switch off my camera. And then I'll just be going through today's presentation. And what I'll also do is also try to man the chat as well as look out for the hands. But if you have a question, please rather raise your hand so that we can have a good conversation. As Lindo Guhle says, my expectation is to get better understanding in managing my finances. Lungelo, good evening, fellow entrepreneurs. Thank you once again, my doe, and thank you, Bitumelo, for such an inspirational intro. My expectations are learning financial literacy in depth. Hence, I'm running a beauty credit provider. Oh, okay. Lungelo, please explain what that means. Like Ushonisa beauty products, or is it a beauty and credit provider? Sorry, I might use very colloquial words, but Lungel, I don't know if you can unmute yourself so that I can better understand what you mean by beauty credit provider. If you can.
Evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Evening. Okay. Let me just quickly explain. Right. In terms when I'm saying a beauty credit provider, it means that I pay for salon services as well as spa services whenever customers cannot afford to, and then at the end of the month they can be able to pay me back via debit order with a 30% interest rate. So that is my beauty credit provider.
Wow. So you are a mashronisa. I wasn't wrong.
Yes,
For
but let's just
women
say
looking
levels.
pretty.
Levels. Probably if you want to get your makeup done, your nails done, your hair done, and you don't have money at the moment, you must just holler at me, and then we'll see what we can do. It's more like getting like a VIP treatment because of you also get a confirmation from your nearby salon or your selected salon or spa that you want, and then we reserve a booking for you, and then you just go and be pretty, and then that's it.
Okay, and how long have you been in business for? I'm just intrigued. Sorry, I might ask you a few more questions.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's not a problem. Remember, you said that we should engage, right? It commenced in 2023 when I was broke, sitting in the kitchen. I was invited in an event, and I didn't have enough money to actually look all good and pretty, and that's how the idea kicked in. And I also want to start an affiliation program for matriculants, maybe bridesmaids, and all that. So yeah, we can get in detail a bit later. But yeah, I was just trying to paint a picture for you so you can understand. Machinista with levels.
There's a question from Nomo and so how do you deal with people not paying you for the services?
Oh, no, Monday, that's a very good question. I always get that a whole lot, right? Like what I normally do is just like any other financial credit provider, I am registered with the NCR and I do follow the financial needs assessment firstly. So it's more like a payday loan service whereby the amounts start from 250 rands to 3,000 rands. We do the financial needs analysis, and then that will determine how much credit you actually qualify for. And another thing is we don't actually want to over-indebt customers. And actually, my mission is to actually make beauty available and much more affordable for people within certain regions, especially Soweto. Hence, you're also from Soweto. So yes, Hala from Soweto. Yeah, that's my expectation. That's why I want to learn more about financial literacy in depth, so that I can be able to continue to differentiate the money that goes to the business and the money that actually comes to me as an individual or as an employee at Laviner's Lavish Look Credit Provider. So I'm looking forward to the session with Dumelo, and I'm also looking forward to actually gaining more, be more like a sponge and absorb all of the information, you understand? So
No,
yes,
thank you so much.
yes, let me not continue talking. Now I'm overtaking your whole session, eh?
No. Don't worry, don't worry. Thank you so much for sharing, Lungelo. Matambelo, you have your hand up?
I hope I did answer Normandy's question, but it's fine. We can continue on the chat box, not a problem.
I saw her hearting or applauding while she were talking. Yes, and
Oh, okay.
she's hearting
That
again.
means that
Yeah,
it's a thumbs up, eh? We're on the right side, the right track.
indeed.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Boitumelo.
Thank you, Lungelo. Matapelo.
Good evening, ladies. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, and you?
I'm good, thank you. No, I wanted to check if somebody's recording the meeting, what we can have.
I think it is, from what I can see.
Hi,
I think Tiamo
Matapelo.
started the recording.
Yes, I've just continued for Tiamo. She's getting home. So it's Kulu here. I'm recording. Don't worry.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Tulu. Okay, so let's get started. So in terms of what we'll be covering today, let me just switch off my camera. In terms of what we'll be covering today, it's 2 modules. The first one is handling your personal and business finances. I think the most important thing here is the biggest lesson for me is if you can't manage your personal finances, it will be very difficult for you to manage your business finances. So the two don't exist in isolation. The two go hand in hand. And it's very important that we start from that part, which is something that we'll be covering later on. And that's looking at things like financial goals, as well as what are different bank accounts that exist, understanding payroll as well as taxes, and understanding budgeting. So the one thing that I might not cover in a lot of depth is customs around, I think it was Lungelo or no, Nonkulule was questioned, but I will speak to it a bit later on. Then module 3 is comprehending debt and the expense of credit. There's good debt and bad debt is what I can say. And it's knowing how to use debt to enhance your business or to take you forward, not to land you in more debt where you find yourself like you strangled financially. And I'll also maybe speak of ways of if you currently find yourself being financially strained because of debt, how are the different ways that you can actually come out of it? So that's what we'll be covering today. So I'll start by asking a few questions. So the first one is, do you have any financial goals for yourself or your business? Number one. Number two, do you know how much income you are expecting? And will it cover your financial obligations? So in other words, will it cover your expenses at the end of each month as an individual, as well as a business? Are you getting enough income to put you in a net positive position? Number three, do you have a budget? And number four, do you have debt? And do you feel you are in control of it? So you can type in the chat room, you can respond to any one of them. So you can either type 1 and then give your answer, or you can raise your hand or answer to 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, so the 4 questions are, do you have any financial goals for yourself or your business? Number 2, do you know how much income you're expecting? And will it cover your financial obligations? Number 3, do you have a budget? And number 4, do you have debt? And do you feel you are in control of the debt that you currently have? So remember, you can also raise your hand, unmute, and talk to me. So, or maybe let me do this. Tato, I see your hand is up.
All right. Thank you, Boitumelo, for very uncomfortable questions. So for me, I want to respond to the one around budgeting.
Okay.
So there is a budget that is drawn up. And then I'm not too sure what happens when the money comes in, right? And
And I'm just really being very honest to say, yes, I do budgeting, but then half of the time I'm not sure what went where. I end up sometimes being short. And I think I've also just realized that I can be an impulsive shopper. So my thing is, how do I stick to the budget? Yeah.
No, and it is important. So let me also, maybe it's something I didn't mention earlier on. This is a safe environment. We're here to learn from each other and to help each other grow our businesses the best way that we know how, especially to share experiences where yours might prevent someone from making the same mistake that you might have made, and vice versa. So I think that's also one of the things that we can take away from today just by people sharing their different experiences. So that is a good one to say, you do have a budget. Maybe my additional question should have been, do you stick to your budget? I think that's the more important question to ask as well. And life happens. That's also one of the things that we shouldn't forget. But you must also know what your strengths and weaknesses are as a person. So Tato's being honest to say, she can be an impulsive buyer. I know I have that habit. So what I do I sometimes say prevention is better than cure. When I do my groceries, I actually avoid malls because I will, whether I've bought the groceries or not, I will push that trolley, or to be free so that I have free hands and I can do whatever. I'll drop my groceries in the car and walk back into the mall. Let me go walk in there because maybe there might be a sale, or I'm remembering that, it would be good to have a new dress or a skirt. And then it's all downhill from there. I'm literally walking out with bags that I never ever budgeted for and things that I never really needed at that point in time. So what I do is when I buy groceries, I go to a mini shopping complex where there's only food stores, and literally only food stores. I go in there and and then I leave. Um, so it's good to know the things that are your biggest weakness so that you know how to put measures in place to reduce your chances of actually you going somewhat wayward. Nomonde, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do have my hand up. Okay, so I'm gonna answer the questions. Hello, ladies.
Okay.
Sorry. So number one, yes, I do have financial goals. For myself, no. Or for yes, for the business. Number two, do
Okay.
you know how much am I expecting? I wouldn't say I know, because my struggle is that I run a bakery. So with running a bakery, I sell bread and cakes. But the issue is that I don't have a delivery vehicle. So most of the time I'm selling on break even. So I don't know how much income I'm getting. Probably I'm paying even myself 500 rands, to say the least. Do I
Okay.
have a budget? Yes, I do have a budget. And I stick to it, because so most of the time, if I don't stick to it, I end up having anxiety. I don't know if you guys remember that I said I handle the finances at home. So that always makes me feel guilty of buying probably McD after doing the shopping and stuff. So yes, I do stick to the budget. Do I have a debt? Yes, I do. In 2020, there was a TREP. It's a loan from SIFA, Township and Rural Entrepreneurship Board, or something like that. I took a loan there.
Oh, okay. SIFA, SEFA, the similar to like
That
IDC, but for small businesses. That one.
yes.
Okay.
So what was supposed to happen was that there is non-financial assistance and the financial assistance. So I got the financial assistance, but the non-financial assistance what was the one that I did not get. So I'm really struggling to pay that loan, but I was able to make arrangements with the debt collector and say, let me pay this amount for a certain time, and then we'll go back to renegotiating the initial amount that I have to pay.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm in control of that or not, but at least I was able to make an arrangement for paying.
Okay, so maybe let me ask a follow-up question, right? You say you run a bakery. Do you run it
Yes.
from at home, or do you have a shop where you work from?
I run from at home, but I'm planning to find a spot in the CBD.
Okay. Your client base, where are you based? Are you in Joburg? When you're saying
No,
CBD,
no, I'm in Bloemfontein.
okay, so you're in Bloemfontein. And do you live in the CBD, or you live in a township outside the CBD or somewhere else?
Outside the CBD, but I was able to make an arrangement with somebody who has a car. Like I pay him a certain amount when he delivers the bread and the cakes for me.
Okay, and are your customers businesses or individuals?
Businesses and individuals. But I'm struggling to get the other business because currently my business doesn't have proper packaging and stuff. Yes.
Okay. Then my other question is, do you know how much it costs you to make the products that you sell?
Yes, I do. I did
Okay.
account, so at least I'm clued up on that.
Okay. No, then that's fine. Um, so I think with, so you've mentioned things like you don't have a car,
That's something.
sorry, you
There's
don't
quite
have a delivery van or something.
Another thing is that I struggle a lot. Like I'm good with the financial part, but the marketing stuff, I'm not a vocal person, so I struggle so much with that. So the plan was to hire somebody. The wholesale and retail center said they have a window whereby they give out like graduates to work for small businesses, and then they will be paying them stipends. So I'm waiting for that. Maybe then I'll be able to hire somebody who will be doing my marketing while I do the bakery and the financial stuff. Will that
Okay.
work?
So for me, let's maybe unpack your business a bit more, right? And the types of customers that you have. So for me, and maybe it's for the ladies to also think about the types of business that they have. Nomonda as a business, that's why I was asking her what's her customer base. And it's important to be able to answer that like when someone asks you, because this business is basically your baby. So it's like asking you what's your child's name, and then you mustn't be like and then you have to try remember. So at least she was able to answer a lot of the questions that I asked her. um Nomonde runs a bakery, so it's items of a low cost and a low selling price. So her business needs volumes. And that's what I was saying about you guys need to understand the type of business that you have. It's different to a car dealership where you can sell one vehicle and you're making a relatively good profit selling that one item. Nomonde needs to sell a few items, and probably the best model, because she's not a spaza shop, probably her best model would be to target businesses where you are a B2B type of company as opposed to B2C. So B2B means business to business. So no more there as a business to another business, which could be a spaza shop or whatever it might be, as opposed to no more there's business selling to Idumelo who's walking past. Those are the different types of things that you should think about as a strategy, because that will affect how you market your business to the question that you're asking.
Yes.
And maybe that's where you need to identify where you could provide the best value to the people or businesses that you're trying to provide or sell your product to. Um, so those are just some of the things to consider as a thought in general. Okay, so I know people have answered a lot in the chat room. But at least you were able, at least it was an opportunity for you as an individual and as a business to reflect on the things, on whether you have a budget, do you have financial goals? Because if you have a goal, you then know what you're working towards. That's the one thing I just wanted to try highlight. And with budgeting, do you actually have a budget? Do you understand how much income you need in order to cover the costs? And are you selling a product that covers, number one, the cost of the item or the service that you're providing? So remember, some people are providing a service like, I think it's Lungelo with the beauty credit provider. That is a service. It's not a product. And that's where you need to understand your business quite in a lot of detail. So this here speaks to the different examples of financial goals. So I'll speak to personal financial goals. And the purpose here is to save for a home, for example, to build emergency funds, to reduce debt, and just to be able to live day to day. That's the purpose of financial goals. And it also is saving for retirement. To the point, I forgot who mentioned it earlier about the money that they have and then it doesn't last. The statistic in South Africa is that people's, and this might be different for entrepreneurs, but people's salaries last 5 days, like on average, unfortunately, in South Africa. You get your money or your salary, and then you're paying off whether it's a bond, it's a car, or it's rent, debt that you might have, and then you have very little money left for maybe food, transportation, etc. So personal financial goals also speaks to investing for the future, saving for education, that's quite important, and creating an estate plan. But also as a personal financial goal, you want to start a business, and that's why all of you are here, because you've started that goal. From a business perspective, it's increasing profits. That's quite important. But also more important is improving your cash flow. So you could have the most profitable business on earth, but if you cannot manage the cash flow of it, your business is as good as like it doesn't exist, because you need the money to be able, so you need to get the money from your customers. And that's why I like the question. I think Nomonde asked Lungelo, how do you actually recover the money from your customers? So you might have people requesting this service. Uti, can I please borrow some money to do my hair and makeup? I'm going to a matric dance and there's 10 people who come to you. That's a sale. So you can recognize it as revenue to say, I've provided this service. And the cost maybe might be minimal and you're making a profit from it. But if you're not recovering your debt, then you don't have the money to be able to pay for your running costs and then to maybe invest that money to grow your business. So cash is quite important, as well as invest for growth. And I guess financial goals also help you to plan and stay focused. That's one of the important things. Also, the one thing I want to say is, in terms of financial goals, it's also important to build brand equity. So people buy into a brand. If people trust your brand, people will continue coming back to you as a return customer. So it's important to have the goals that actually meet that, and retaining or keeping your customer base as well as growing it over time. In order to make sure your business is financially sustainable. So these are just different examples of budgets and the types of expenses that you get and income. So personal, you get for example, you'll get income of 10,000 Rand. There's different types of expenses that you incur. There's fixed, there's variable, and then there's irregular. Your fixed means irrespective of how much you earn in a month, you always incur that amount. And that includes things like rent or insurance or a bond, so to speak, assuming that the interest rate doesn't change. From a variable perspective, it's things that change every month. Groceries, you can't necessarily say all the time that you'll spend X amount on groceries. Transport as well is variable depending on where you go, from a business perspective as well as personal travel. Then things that might be irregular is if, for example, you get sick and then you go to a doctor, your medical aid only covers, if you have it, medical aid only covers a certain portion, and then you need to pay an additional amount. So those are different examples of personal. And then Fixed as well from a business perspective is salaries, assuming people earn a salary and not a wage. Then there's rent. Your variable could be a wage, because maybe people get paid based on the hours that they work. And this includes your stock as well as delivery costs that you need to incur within a business perspective. Any questions before I continue to the different types or to bank accounts as a topic? Okay, I don't see any hands at this point in time. Okay, so in terms of bank accounts, there's different types of bank accounts that you can get from a business perspective. There's current accounts, there's savings, as well as fixed deposits. So I know with one of the banks, so there's they have 3 different accounts. One is your day-to-day transactional account. The other one is what they call a money on call. So you can put your savings or your surplus cash in there and you can access it at any point in time. That gives you a higher interest rate than you would get if you left your money in your current account. Then there's a fixed deposit, or some banks call it a 32 deposit, 32-day account. That's the one where you also earn a lot more interest than your savings account, or your money on call account, because they fix your money or they lock it in for at least 30 days. And you can only access it after 30 days. But if you want to access it immediately, you incur a penalty that the bank actually dictates to you. That's some of the things that you need to consider. For myself, within my business, I actually have all 3. I have the current account, which I use for transactions. Then I have the money on call account, where if I have surplus cash, I then put it into the money on call. Then if I know that I'm unlikely to use that money within the money on call, I transfer it into the fixed deposit or the 32-day account. But I still leave some money that I can access in the money on call, so that I'm not incurring a penalty should I need certain amounts in a short period of time. So you need to understand the type of business that you have and the needs that you might be able to the needs that might exist at different points in time. So for me, for example, I mentioned earlier on that I have a kind of like a property portfolio, for lack of a better word. I have a place that has multiple rooms, so it's communal living. And at some point in time, I was able to build the different rooms. One of the things I believe in is providing people with dignified accommodation, and a place where they can call people and family to say, I might have different neighbors, but they still find it a place where they can call and host people. So I built that, and then I started earning rental income. And that rental income, I started saving it. So I put a certain amount in the money on call. And then once it gets to a certain amount, I put it into the fixed deposit. And that allowed me to then buy a second property and then build more rooms. So that's how I use the different bank accounts that I have. If you have multiple businesses, so I don't know if there are people in the audience who have different types of businesses. So for example, I mentioned earlier that I run an accounting firm, as well as on a professional services firm, as well as the property one. Actually, it was one of the founders of my door, a good friend of mine. He was like, no, boys, it's better to separate the 2 businesses. You should form one for the property and then have a separate one for your consulting services, so that you can separate the 2. And since then, I've actually separated it so that if I want to go obtain a loan for the properties, I have a separate company that actually speaks to it, and I'm able to show the transactions that happen within the business compared to the services business. So the accounting services. So that's how I've chosen to run or set up the different bank accounts within the business. But it's also very important for you to do research around the different bank accounts that exist and how it can best service you. So for me, I find that FNB is a lot easier because my customers are some run like informal businesses. My properties are in townships. What they do is I also, when I deal with some of the people who do the maintenance, it's easier for me to pay them, or they find it easier for me to pay them with an e-wallet. An e-wallet is convenient for me, and that's the type of service that FNB provides for the type of business that I run. Another thing that is convenient is FNB I've found is more accessible as an ATM compared to others. I'm not going to include Capitec because at the time that I started my business, there wasn't anything around Capitec for business account. That might have changed now, but Capitec also is usually easier for financial purposes. For some customers, a lot of them use Time Bank or Capitec. So what I then did is I actually opened a Capitec account in my name. Then my tenants pay into my Capitec bank account, then I transfer it into my bank account. It's important to always have a trail of the money that you get, because if you want to go get a loan, you need to show that money is coming in. So one of the things I want to do long term is get a loan to be able to expand my property portfolio. So all the rental that I get, I have to reflect it in my bank account, irrespective of how my clients pay me. So those are the types of things that you need to take into account with the type of business that you run. I'm hoping, or I'm assuming all of you have opened a bank account, but generally when you open a bank account, you need an ID copy of all of the directors as well as your CIPC document, and they generally want a proof of address for some of them. And I was mentioning earlier on, when you're selecting the different type of banks, you need to consider the monthly fees that they charge you. Some accounts, and this is the research you always have to do. I made this mistake when I initially started my business. I picked a bank account that was transactional. So they charged me for every transaction that I incurred. That works for a business that maybe has 1 or 2 transactions a month. But if you're transacting every single month, those bank charges will hit you. So then I had to transfer it to a different type of bank account. So those are things that you need to research. As well as what do they say with regards to withdrawal and deposit fees. My tenants deposit money, so I had to do the research to see which bank actually pays me the least or charges me the least for depositing money. As clients to banks, we are price takers. They dictate to us, Uti, this is how much we'll charge you for bringing business to us, which I still think is unfair. But those are the things that I've had to consider as part of the bank accounts that I choose. And also I'm going to use online versus banking services. That's also important. I prefer online banking or using a phone. I don't like branches. I find it highly inconvenient. So for me, I prefer to do everything on my phone or on a laptop. But there's different challenges that come with the digital type of services. And that's the one thing that I was going to show over here. Sorry, with the digital banking services. So different banks offer a virtual card. I find that as a risk personally. It's just my thing. I'd rather carry the card than if my phone gets stolen, then I know for a fact that the people won't be able to access my virtual card. There's mobile apps, and they also charge or cost you a lot less. The pro is that it's easy to access and it's convenient. The con is that you can't walk into a branch, as well as if you are sensitive to data costs, it might cost you some data. But for me, it's safer to have everything on me than having to get into a car, go into a queue, and go into a bank and ask people questions. For me, that's just some of the challenges or the things that I prefer. I see there's some comments. I recently changed from Capitec business to F&B. Capitec feels very inexperienced as it is failing you and not as good as the personal one. Okay. That's interesting feedback. So I guess it also helps maybe to share some of your experiences regarding bank accounts, but it's very important to select a bank and a bank account that actually, how can I put it, that meets your strategic needs and strategic objectives. So I find that, for example, NetBank, it's difficult to find a NetBank account anywhere in general or a branch. So I said that was my last option, but that's me. Other people might find it better because maybe your business is more high end and you want to be able to appeal to a different type of customer that might be a NetBank type of customer. So you just need to understand what you as a business are trying to achieve. I'll switch this off again. Then the next section that we'll be going through is understanding payroll taxes, payroll as well as taxes. Before I continue, are there any questions? I just want to see. So Nomonde, I've used F&B as it has an accounting and payroll system that you get for free. That's true. So they almost do their bookkeeping for you if you set it up appropriately. Are there any tax benefits or implications for business fixed deposits? Not really. The biggest tax implication is that you get taxed on the interest that you earn. That's one of the things. Your bank fees, the bank fees that you incur, if you're saving your money, won't cancel out the interest that you're earning within your business. Okay, I don't see any hands raised at this point in time, but I have a question again, understanding payroll and taxes. What information is included in a payslip? So the assumption I'm making, okay, maybe let me not make the assumption. Please raise your hand if you have employees. Keep them raised. Is it only Nomonde? No. Okay, I'm seeing a few more. Matabello. Okay. Okay, so is everyone else a one-man show? Can I assume that? Maybe by thumbs up. Okay. And it's fine if you're a one-man show. But more like volunteers. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So it's quite important because the reason you are here as entrepreneurs is you want the business to grow. You want your business to grow. You want to have employees. You want to be able to contribute to the economy and help other people get jobs. So I think it's quite important as part of trying to get employees, you need to know the information that needs to be included on a pay slip. There's nothing, I think for me, when I started getting a salary, the one thing I was happy about is to take a pay slip in order to be able to go buy a car. And that for me, buy a car, number one, number two, buy a property, because without a pay slip, you won't be able to get any of those things. And that's where you need to, back to the initial point that I made. I'm not saying everyone must go buy cars, buy a home. There's good debt and there's bad debt, and it's all about assessing it. So number one, it also, what I spoke to earlier, it gives dignity to your employees to say, I actually work for a structured company. It's a company that considers me to be an employee. I have my name, ID number, I have an employee number. Those are things that you can even set up in Word and save it as a PDF if you cannot afford applications that actually allow you to set up a pay slip. But I think it is important to, as part of giving dignity to your employees and to yourself, giving yourself a salary, however much it might be, and showing that this is the gross income, these are the things that need to be deducted, etc. Let me see what's in the chat. For me, they're part-time employees. I call them for catering mostly. Okay, I've casual earn. Okay, even casual workers, to some extent, I believe should get a payslip because they're working for a certain amount of time, even though it might be for a month, and then they skip a month and then they come back. It's still fine. Tobeka says, in a payslip, you have a gross salary, deductions, and net going into your bank account. That's true. A payslip generally includes employee details, pay period, gross salary, deductions, and net salary. Yeah. So those are some of the things that are included in a salary. Let me just skip to this. Okay, so in terms of earnings, it's gross. So basically, what is your total earnings that you're receiving as an employee, or how much you're paying to your employees as an employer? A basic salary or a wage. So a salary is a fixed amount. A wage is based on number of hours. That's the difference between a salaried employee and a wage employee. And then there's overtime if people work overtime. There's commission if, for example, you run a business like a car dealership, you have people who are salesmen, and then they get commission based on the cars that they sell and the value of the car. It's a percentage of the transaction, basically. A travel allowance. So some companies pay a travel allowance. If, for example, you're a salesperson, you travel, you need to sell a service or a product, companies give you a travel allowance in order to be able to execute on your role. And then other allowances. So that, when you add it all up, gives you your gross salary. Your net salary is basically what goes into your bank account after deductions that you calculate as an entity. And these are the things that contribute to deductions. There's pay as you earn, so PAYE. There's UIF, that's usually 1%, with the cap of what the 1% should be. There's pension or provident. There's medical aid if you provide that as a business, depending on how mature you are as an entity. Other companies don't necessarily provide that. It's up to the employee to use their net income to actually pay for their medical aid. So where I work, that's what I do. So it's not included as part of a deduction for me, but I then pay for my own medical aid. The one thing that's important for PAYE is you, and Normand, I'll come to you now. When you register your business, and I don't know if the ladies in the room have registered their companies for income tax. So income tax is the tax you pay on you as a business. And this excludes things like PAYE and UIF. So there's a separate profile that you basically get if you need to pay PAYE and UIF. PAYE has to be submitted every month. SARS is quite, what can I say, strict. If you registered for PAYE as a business and you don't submit your returns every month, automatically the very second you are late, they give you a 10% penalty. Then every day they add interest on that penalty and the amount that you owe to them that you haven't paid. Remember, as an employer, you have an obligation to pay over taxes on behalf of your employee to SARS to say, this is the money I've withheld and I'm paying it over to SARS on behalf of an employee. I won't get into it in a lot of details, but there's different thresholds. So people who earn below a certain amount they don't necessarily need to pay taxes, but from a certain amount you start paying tax, and then the maximum tax threshold I think is about 45% as an individual. As a business, on your income tax you get taxed 28%. So generally I find that it's better to be taxed as a business than an individual, depending on the scale that you're in. Nomande, you have a question?
Yes, I wanted to ask on UIF, do you pay UIF? Like, let me say I'm an employee and okay, I receive about 27 Rand per hour. let me say like a certain amount, like the hours that I worked, they didn't reach a certain amount. Is there an amount that they say like if you get 2.5, you have to pay that 1%, or if you are below, you can't pay it? Is there something like that?
No, so I stand to be corrected, but for UIF, there's a maximum that they charge you or they can deduct from your salary, but there isn't necessarily a minimum. Remember, UIF, I think it stands for Unemployment Insurance Fund. So should you, for example, go on maternity leave and it's unpaid, or I'm not sure if it's paid, but I know definitely if you're getting unpaid maternity leave, if you then lose your job and you become unemployed, the amount that the different employers have paid on your behalf to UIF, you can actually go to them and claim it to say, can I please have that money because I'm currently unemployed? So I know there's a maximum. I'm not sure if there is a minimum.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then Sekgofatso, so when is the right stage to create a payslip, UIF or PAYE? So I would say as soon as you employ people, give them a payslip, so that they have a track of sorts, to be able to say that they've been earning a salary. PAYE, you should register for it when you have employees. But it also depends on how much you're paying your employees as well. So one thing, I don't want to give like a general response to this. My suggestion is maybe speak to the MyDo team so that they understand your business a lot better, to see at which stage you can actually, or you should start registering for PAYE and UIF. Because as soon as you apply for it, you have to submit it every month as a business. And if you don't, you incur penalties. So that's quite important. Tshegofatso, I hope I answered your question. Then as a business, so I don't know if any of you have been employees. So there's if you've ever worked in a business and you were an employee at the end of the tax year. So the tax year is different to your financial year as a business. So the tax year is 1 March to 28 February. And that's why we have the tax budget usually towards the end in Feb, where we have the minister talking about the budget, because the tax year then begins on the 1st of March and then ends 28 February. From a business, I forgot the point. Oh, yes, from an IRP 5 perspective, that's also the tax year for individuals. So an IRP 5 basically gives a summary of the income that you've earned for that year, as well as the deductions that have been made. And then they compare it to what your income is. They call it taxable income. So you've earned all of this money, and now as an individual, you need to be taxed. This is how much you owe SARS, and they compare it to how much your employer has been paying on your behalf. So as an entrepreneur, you need to submit PAYE every month. Towards the end of the financial year, they then ask you, so it's a EMP 541 form that you complete. Then at the end of the tax year, there's another form that actually consolidates everything for all of your employees. And you say, this is how many employees I've had, this is the months that they've worked, and it gives a summary, and then you submit it to SARS as a business. What SARS does is that it creates an IRP 5 for your employees and they send it to them. That's also another service that you should maybe try to get more information about from the MyDo team. I think that's one of the services that they offer as part of capacitating you and educating you around that. But I think it's very important to consider those different things for your employees. But I think based on the hands that were shown, not a lot of people have employees, which is fine, but it's something to consider and think about for you expanding your business. I think that's very important, and having a long-term vision and a long-term goal for yourselves and your business. Any questions so far? Before I continue, Tato?
So we do a lot. I am in the nonprofit space, right? And what I've seen them do a lot of times is, so it would be project based or based on grant funding that's available. And so there isn't like a formal contract, but they now give SLAs. And on the SLA, you don't have things like your payee, you're not paying UIF. So if it's a stipend, it's maybe it will be 3.5 and it all goes to you. So how do you, because now I'm realizing as you're doing this presentation that that's wrong, because then what happens at the end of a project, for instance, if it was a 2-year project and there isn't any unemployment, insurance fund. So how can we, so now I'm asking for my business to say, how do we move from the ordinary way of how the NGO world plays um, wages and salaries or stipends, right? To ensure that we are compliant, or we are able to make sure that people do get dignity even after projects have ended. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I hear you. So number one, the one thing I would suggest is start with a pay slip. So even though it's a stipend, it's still money you are paying someone to work for you on a particular project. I think that's the one thing. That's the one thing I would suggest. Number two, from a UIF perspective, so let me give you an indication. So in terms of the income tax brackets, people get taxed, I think it's 18% if you're earning up to 216 or 220,000. So if I do the quick maths there, and this is over 12 months. So on average, that's a salary of about 18,000. But I know to some extent certain amounts are exempt. So it's better to deduct UIF and to do the PAYE than not, especially in your type of environment as an NGO, because it will also speak to your compliance. So if you continue to get grant funding, you can actually, or apply for grant funding, you can say part of the stipend that you give to people who work on the different projects is that you are compliant with SARS from a PAYE perspective. There's UIF. You do give your not volunteers, but the people who work on the projects pay slips whilst they're working on that different project. So I think it adds to compliance in general, and it strengthens your application should you go apply for more funding for a different project. And also recording it in your financials. Tato, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Okay, so Matapelo, it's a pleasure. Matapelo is asking, what happens in a case where an employer doesn't pay UIF for employees and is not paying SARS as well? Mind you, it's a medium-sized business that gets tenders. So that's illegal, like the long and short of it. Especially, so let me put it this way, especially if a company, your employer is deducting PAYE and they're not paying it over to SARS, it's illegal. And also things like pension. So the way so at work, for us to see that our money is actually being paid over to, for example, there's different companies that do pension and provident funds. One example is Alexandra Forbes. They send us a statement probably every 6 months. So that's how I'm able to see that my employer is paying over what they deduct from my salary and contributed towards the pension fund. Because you don't want to get to a point where you're retiring and you realize that your company has never paid the pension or provident fund that they said that they were deducting from your salary, but was never paid over. So that's one of the ways you can see it. The other way from a SARS perspective is when, as an employee, you get an IRP 5, and maybe it shows that your salary, you've received 200,000, your taxable income maybe, or the amount that you owe SARS is, I don't know, 10,000 Rand, and it shows there that your company has never paid anything on your behalf. That's when you know something's wrong, because you can go to your employer and say, where's the money that you deducted? Because let's say your gross is 20,000 Rand and your net is 15. Where's the 15 that, or part of the 5 that was the PAYE? Where did it go to? So it's illegal. The long and short of it, Matapel. There's another question. Why is it important to split evenly between the employer and employee for UIF? So it's similar, I think, I stand to be corrected. So it's similar to the principle that's provided for provident and pension funds. Employers make a certain contribution as well as the employee in order to accelerate the growth of the amount that is being contributed either to UIF, pension fund, or to your provident fund. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so let me continue to understanding a budget. Maybe too, I forgot who it was. It was either Lungelo or Nonkulego or Nomonde. You had mentioned you run an basically you import some of your products and you then make a product to sell to your customers. There you actually incur things like import taxes as well as custom duties. From a tax perspective, especially as a business, you probably do need to set up an account so that your products won't clear customs or won't reach you until you've actually paid for the customs that might exist on the different products that you are importing. That's quite important. And I think, I'm not certain, I stand to be corrected, some of it actually can be claimed back as a business. Some of those taxes that you get, that you need to pay either as customs or import duties. So I hope that addresses the one tax question that was asked earlier on. So now we're going to move on to budgeting. And maybe just in the interest of time, I'll just speak to this. That's one of the questions that I asked earlier on. So budgeting helps one to compare your actual spending to what you actually expected to incur. That's quite important so that you can monitor your financial transactions. Another important value or the importance of budgeting is to know, as a business, if I am running Bitumelo's accounting services, am I pricing my service at the right amount to cover the cost that I incur every month? And that's quite important. The things you need to take into consideration when you're doing budgeting and seeing whether your business is sustainable or not is looking at things like, what are your fixed expenses or your variable expenses. So I think it was Nomonde with the bakery. Her fixed expenses currently is that she's not paying for rent because she's operating from home. But the day she moves into a shop in town, she will then need to pay for rent. And that rent, she will probably need to pay that amount irrespective of how much she makes. So she needs to know, factor that as part of her budgeting in order to know how many loaves of bread or how many cakes or scones or biscuits she needs to sell in order to break even. The other thing she needs to take into account is her delivery costs. And maybe for, I think it was Lungelo who runs the beauty credit provider, she might have fewer costs. So it might be the cost of her. So I don't know how she gets her capital. I don't know if it's capital that she's contributed to the business, which makes it easier. It's a loan by a shareholder. Or if she's borrowing that money from someone else in order to borrow someone else that money in order to be able to provide that service. And maybe as a business, because she said she's registered with NCR, there might be a yearly, I don't call it a subscription, but it's an amount that you need to pay in order to remain accredited with NCR. So you need to understand the different things that exist within your business, to understand what are the things that you need to account for as part of your budgeting, and to make sure that you're running a sustainable business. So for me, I'll give you an example for both the accounting services as well as the rental property. So the accounting business, I pay for an online platform to do people's books. It's a fixed amount. I know it's X every month. There's also another application that I use that consolidates everything and presents the information for my clients. That's another one. Number two is ad hoc employees who assist me with the compilation of the financial statements. So it's pretty much like a salary or a wage, depending on what the type of business or the client wants. For retainers, it's a salary. For people who come ad hoc, it's then deemed to be a wage. And then I price my services based on whatever someone needs. So if someone needs a comprehensive type of business or solution, so monthly management accounts, submission of tax returns, PAYE, VAT, if you've registered for VAT, then all of that is included as a monthly amount, and I charge it. And I compare that to what my monthly costs are. So I don't have fixed costs, or let me say large costs in terms of running my business for the accounting services. They could be, for example, if someone is a doctor, or let me do my property one, although it's very similar. Let me use a different example. So, for
Hi,
example, if I'm a
Budimela.
doctor, yes. Hi, Tiamo.
Hi, Budimela. So sorry to disturb. Just a quick note because I just want to be cognizant of time. I see that you're on the last topic for module 2.
Yeah.
Just going forward, I think just so that we try to not go over time too much. I suggest that we just keep the questions to being dropped in the chat box from here on. And then we will just compile them and send the responses via email to all the beneficiaries after the session, if that's okay. Just so that, yeah, we try and keep time there.
Okay.
Thanks for your
So for the
understanding.
one, yeah, so for the last module, it's like one slide that I'll just go through the different
Okay.
aspects of it. Yeah.
Okay, if it's one side, then that's cool. We can continue.
Okay.
Thanks, Budimela.
That's fine. There's a question here saying, what are some common budgeting mistakes to avoid? So don't lie to yourself. I think that's the one important thing. You need to be realistic. And when I say lie, I'm saying be realistic about the expenses that you incur on a monthly basis, as well as how realistic it is for you to attain the sales that you want to make on a monthly basis. That's quite important. So also, you need to understand the type of business that you have. Um, the example I was giving earlier on about a doctor. Doctors right now probably have lots of people at their doors every single day because it's winter, people are sick left, right, and center. Come summer, there might be fewer customers, but if you are a doctor who relies mostly on people who are on medical aid, you probably have an influx of people at the beginning of the year, depending on the type of doctor that you are, because that's when people's medical aid funds are replenished at the beginning of the year. Whereas maybe October or from September onwards, you see fewer customers who are medical aid type of customers, but you might have more cash paying customers who don't have medical aid. So it's important to understand the different types of customers that you have and how if your business is cyclical. So another example, ice creams, if you're running an ice cream shop, business is not booming at this point in time. But from September onwards, you need to be able to budget and see how much is it that I expect to sell, and can I meet that demand for my busy season? And can the busy seasons actually cover the seasons where I don't get a lot of money? or a lot of customers. And that's where you, as a business, you could also consider diversification of the types of services that you offer if you are a cyclical type of business. Those are just some of the things to think about. Then there's different things that affect your income and expenses that need to be taken into consideration. Let me just quickly go through those factors. So the things that affect expenses is things like salaries, rental, services that you might be paying for, insurance. You might be paying also for travel if you're a business where you go to different customers in order to provide or sell a different service. And it's very important in identifying your expenses. It's important to actually split them between what is fixed. So irrespective of what you do every month, you'll still pay that amount. Then identifying the things that are variable costs. So that could be things like your cost or your stock. And the amount of stock that you incur is dependent on the sales that you make. So that's a variable cost. And then there's irregular expenses. So things that you never thought you would incur as a business. So those are the different buckets that you should put your expenses in. So I think that is one of the most important things to take into account. And the important thing about budgeting as well is that you need to compare it to your actual, because your budget is null and void if it's not aligned or adjusted. So it's not something you do once off. Budgeting is something that you do every month. You need to compare it to your actuals so that you can better understand your business financially. So that you know, actually, if I thought that my salaries would have been 10% of my operating expenses, when you do an analysis, you actually see that it's 50%. Why is that the case? How is it that you can reduce the cost or increase your revenue? So remember, with budgeting and becoming profitable, it's either you do one of two things or both. You reduce your costs, so you need to understand what are your costs every month, or you increase the amount of revenue that you make, because that then increases the profit that you make as a business. I hope that makes sense. And then the one thing that I want to then look at in module 3 is comprehending debt and expenses for credit. So I guess the one thing that is being asked is, what is debt? Debt is money that is not yours. So you're borrowing it in order to either run your life, or number two, to buy a property or to buy a capital type of asset. If you're running a business as a doctor, you could take out a loan to buy the machinery that you need and the equipment. For example, a lungelo might not need capital investment. It might be the cash he needs to then lend to other people. A Tato, I think she was the one who runs a bakery. She might need capital money and debt to buy an oven, and maybe sometimes you need it for working capital. So there's two types of debt, short-term and long-term debt. The one thing I would advise around debt, and it can be difficult as an SME when you're starting out, is actually having debt that you aren't using. You're using that debt to actually keep your business afloat. That's one of the challenges that a lot of SMEs face that I've seen. A lot of businesses, some SMEs actually, some don't succeed within the first 5 years because they're working on survival mode. One of the ways is to prevent that is to have debt that actually helps you grow your business and not sink into a lot more debt. So the person was talking about CIFA earlier on. CIFA is a great mechanism in order to actually grow a business. But if you're not getting the revenue that you need, it can be actually quite a big challenge. So I once had a client who was funded by CIFA. They were one of the first diamond producers, I think, in South Africa. and they were kind of doing relatively well. Then they opened a store. SIFA funded them to open that store, but because they weren't in a place that allowed them to get feet, so that type of business needs feet, it needs to be in a shopping center. They found that they struggled to actually, number one, service the debt that they're getting from SIFA, as well as other debt that they actually had incurred. And they needed to employ different strategies in order to service that debt. And also just to keep the business afloat. So that's quite important. And the things to consider when you're looking at debt, there's two types of debt, long-term and short-term. And the long term is what you should be using to try grow your business. The short term is what you're trying to do or use to make sure it gives you the small kickstart that you need to keep going as a business and to remain sustainable. There's different types of costs of credit. It's very important with any agreement. I always say with any agreement, even if you ask a million questions, rather ask the million questions before you sign so that you understand what you're getting yourself into. A lot of people fall prey to entering into a loan agreement, and sadly, it's usually out of desperation. So people also play on the fact that some business owners might be desperate. So it's important as a business owner, you're not desperate. Well, if you are desperate, at least understand what you're getting yourself into. I think that's the most important thing that I want to mention is understand the type of debt that you're getting and understand what you're going to use that debt for and make sure you have someone who holds you accountable for it. So if you know someone who doesn't manage finances well, rather have someone to help you manage those finances than trying to do it yourself. That's quite important, but also it needs to be one person or individuals that you trust and people you can be vulnerable with, because finances are quite a sensitive thing to be discussing with people. Um, Especially if you're in a family where you are a breadwinner. I think one of the sessions 2 weeks ago, someone said, I'm a breadwinner. Discussing finances at home can be a bit of a challenge because then, if you're running a business, people think you're earning a lot of money. Back at the ranch, you're just really trying to make ends meet. It's also important when you are looking at those different agreements, understand the different cost implications. So at times there's an initial cost that you're paying for. You need to understand the interest rate that is being applied. So if someone says it's prime plus, you must know what the prime is. Or if it's a fixed amount for the term of the period, is it compound interest, which it usually is? And just understanding if you cannot service that debt, what are the implications of it? So there's usually secured lending and unsecured lending. If, let's say, you take out a loan and ubambisa ngemoto, or your home, if you don't pay that debt, that person who you lent money from or you borrowed money from can actually come and seize your assets in order to recover the money that you owe them. So it's very important with debt. It's extremely important. You need to understand the type of debt that you're getting into. How much is it going to cost you every month? What is the period of that debt? Is it long-term or short-term? Is it secured or unsecured? So are you ubambisa with a certain asset that you have or not? Yeah, so that's quite important. And then with business debt, one thing, unfortunately, within South Africa and in other countries, it's very difficult. This is one of the last points that I'll make before I close. Um, One of the most difficult things to do as a business in South Africa is get money from a bank. So what some business owners actually find themselves doing is going to loan sharks. And that's because businesses require you to have financial statements. Sometimes they want you to have audited financial statements, and they want you to be a business that's been in existence for the past 5 years. As entrepreneurs under my door, I really encourage you, number one, the way you can improve your credit score as a business. Number one, open a bank account. Number two, have all of your transactions go through that bank account because it shows history, it shows performance of your business, and don't do a cash type of business. Number 3, use the services that are offered by MyDo in order to be able to do management accounts or financial statements for the time that your business has been in existence for. If, for example, you've been in existence for the past 5 years, in year 1, your revenue might be extremely low. Year 2, there might, as long as you're showing some form of progression and that your business is growing somewhat, that financial history helps you in getting some form of debt depending on what you're trying to achieve. It could be with a bank, it could be with an IDC, it could be with SEFA. But the most important thing on the back end of what one of the ladies mentioned earlier on with SEFA, you have to understand what you're entering into. SEFA, and similar to other funders, they will say we're giving you this loan maybe for 2 years. And so that client that I was helping, so I was there as a mentor, they actually didn't know that they have to pay 50,000 Rand a month in order to service the SEFA debt. They weren't even making 50,000 Rand as part of the revenue that they thought they were going to make. Mind you, this is over and above the cost of the rental that they're paying in a high-end shopping complex. There were a lot of factors. So the most important thing about debt is understand it before you get into it. No matter how desperate you might be, just understand for yourself so that you know what the implications could be if things go south. So that's quite important. Yeah, so in the interest of time, I think I will bring it to a close. Siamo and Kolo. I hope this was valuable to everyone. I see there's quite a few comments and questions. So I think debt review reconciliation is terrible. They don't tell you what the actual implications are, how difficult it is to get out, and is actually available. Is it actually available for businesses? So the debt review one is a challenge because you actually get charged to get out of the debt. That's the one thing that I also find is a bit weird. That's the one challenge. And then number 2, you almost like surrendering your financial independence to someone else to help you manage your money in general. For businesses, they usually go through like business rescue, but as an SME, I don't think that currently exists. I'm not sure. I stand to be corrected, but I do think the most important thing that I've seen with some businesses, especially within non-white communities, or should I say Black communities, is at times we find it shameful to talk about finances, or we find it difficult, not shameful, difficult to talk about finances because it's a sensitive topic. And that's why some businesses end up dying a slow death because they can't go and ask someone else for advice out of fear of being judged. So I think the most important thing is to remove that fear and the possible element of judgment, or going to people who you know it's a safe space to be able to talk to about your finances, because some businesses don't succeed because they don't know who to go to, or they do know who to go to, but struggle to be able to talk about it. And if, as females in this room, you have children, it's also important to teach your kids about financial literacy from a young age, because if you don't do that, you run the risk of it being a generational curse, so to speak, if you can't manage your personal finances as well as business finances. So yeah, that's it. I think I am almost going to be kicked out by Kulu and Siamo. So I'll stop it there.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Waitumelo. That was such an insightful session, not only for the ladies, because I can see they've been engaging, but for me too as well. Even though we are a team at my door, I feel that was excellent. I also learned a lot. We have recorded this session and the questions have been noted down. So everyone will be getting their responses. I will be sending out the link this week for this first session. Ladies, please do not forget next week's session on the 17th, same time, same place. I will resend the link on the group next week so that everyone joins. Thank you so much, Boitumelo. That was amazing. And I hope everyone enjoyed it. And we shall see each other next week. And reminder, if anyone has forgotten to send their contract, proof of address, as well as their ID copy, please do send it ASAP. I'll be looking out for those. We will see Boitumelo next week, ladies. Please send through your questions and we will cover them next week.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.